There we go. Right, that's working now. Right, hello, hey everyone. Right, it is another Thursday, another thing to tackle on broadcasting at FGC events. Please excuse me. It's started a little bit late today just because I was finishing dinner and all that sort of stuff, but managed to get it on time. So this is going to be a bit of an interesting one. I put out a poll last week and we got even numbers of audio and cameras. And I basically flipped a coin, audio heads, cameras tails, and audio one. So we'll be covering audio, and audio is going to be a lot of talking. I couldn't put everything on my slides this time, so I'm probably gonna release an extra set of slides because there's a lot of talking and instruction based stuff to look for and stuff as well. Yo, oh, my brother's in chat. Nice. What's up, fam? You good? I hope you're good. I am just need. I've missed one thing that I was supposed to get because I don't actually have an audio mixer with me, so due to lockdown and everything. So I just need. I need a test picture. There we go. Got one. Close all tabs. Just getting ready for radio. Nice stuff. Nice stuff. Yeah, radio. I hope if this doesn't finish too late, I'll probably come in for the end of it. I still got water with me today. I missed water yesterday because I was hella thirsty for the ending part of it. Anyway, right, we have got a lot to get on with today because audio is a beast of a subject, and I'm sure that there'll be a ton of people in chat that have their own very special opinion on how audio works because audio is brutal. So, it is what it is. Just let me know if my mic volumes are okay and stuff. My audio was popping a little bit last time. I don't think Edwin's around to let me know, but yeah. Anyway, should we crack on with this actually? Um, um, right. So with audio is a bit of a brutal one because there's a lot in here. Audio where capture cards you could probably fit into the same aspect as like video cameras and stuff like that and put it into the same category. Audio is all encompassing, and one of the biggest issues that it has is the fact is that there's so much to it, and that becomes so much of a problem for a lot of newcomers. So we'll try and break it down bit by bit, and I'll answer as many questions as possible. So, right, we should go into the first topic. And also, please excuse my slides are a little bit rough. I still got a bit of work to do on some of them, but we'll get into the first bit because what is audio, right? Audio is a horrible subject that is tough unless you're a sound engineer first, where most of it comes pretty naturally. But when you're broadcasting at FGC event, there's multiple things you have to sort of keep in mind when you're doing game audio. So the first is audio. What does it include? So okay, it's game audio, commentary, your house mic. Um, it could be external audio sources, such for example, if you're playing ambient music on it, but you don't want it to come from the stream PC, then you usually have an MP3 player plugged in. If you've got another setup that you have audio coming through, that's also something to take into account. It's everything all encompassed in one. It's the post processing of the audio. So usually your mixer can do most of this stuff. However, if you're savvy enough, you could basically use digital post processing for it as well. The inputs needed for your event presentation. This is important because um, not every event's going to be the same. So, for example, uh, if you're using a console over HDMI, you might not have your game audio running through you might not have your game audio running through the mixer. but you might have it running through the HDMI of your capture card is a possibility. But it might not be the case. If you might be running on something like a GameCube, for example, that doesn't have HDMI audio, it has RCA out and all that sort of stuff, and all those sort of stuff that you need to take into account. So yeah, or it could be an arcade cab where you might have to deal with optical in, or you might have to deal with quarter of an inch and stuff like that, jack, and having the right mixer for the right presentation size. Right. So, and yeah, different mixers. NGI itself, whenever I'm doing various events, I have different types of mixers. So if I'm doing a pretty large event, I have my super big mixer, which has got something like 24 different inputs and stuff like that, and 3 different outputs, and 2 different, and a digital output channel, and it's got loads of individual things here and there. You might have seen, if you've been to Revo, you might have seen it on the mainstream at some point. Um, or if you've been to Free Play City, you might have seen the big silver mixer, and then you've got a slightly smaller one, which is the blue one, which is like a medium, which fits in between the silver one and our tiny silver one, and that's blue, but it has only 12 inputs in it rather than the 24, and 2 outs and stuff like that. And then we have our very, very small silver mixer, which is very special for very small events where we're not dealing with house audio and stuff like that. So that only has, I think, 6 audio inputs in it, and it only has one main audio out, which is the one that goes into the broadcasting PC and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, very, very simple stuff. Oh, I have forgotten my stream music. How silly of me. There we go. I'm about to say I felt weird without it. Anyway, hey Jinxie, how's things? So yeah, so that's sort of what audio encompasses, and I think that's the sort of that's the very simple way to look at it. Obviously, it gets a little bit more difficult the more it scales. Oh, also when you're doing an event, this is one of the few things that scales with the size of the event in a very linear way. So depending on how big your event is and how many input sources you've got and how much things you want to do with your broadcasting setup, your audio responsibilities will go up as in correlation with that. And it's one of the very few things that goes up directly with the event style itself. One of the biggest issues about audio, though, that I didn't put down is that audio is incredibly expensive. In terms of like, I should put it this way: if you're doing video, a lot of the video stuff you can probably get done on the cheap, considering on comparison to how much it would be if let's say you were getting cheaper cameras and stuff like that compared to like the industry standard. So because of that, it ends up being a lot more say expensive to start off with. So even when we started off very small, like a mixer with all of the cables and the 2 broadcasting headsets and all that sort of stuff cost us around £400. And all of our webcams at the time and stuff, we had like 3 webcams and a capture card and that sort of stuff only cost us about 200-ish or so. So it gives you an example of how much or how big of a difference it all is when you in terms of costs. But like the more money you spend on your audio setup, the better it sounds, and that's without a doubt. So moving on. So audio equipment is sort of there's sort of basic things to remember. Broadcasting headset is your main priority, and these are probably going to set you back the most amount of money. Broadcasting headsets are very interesting because what I would say is basic entry level ones cost about 30 quid. 30 to 40 pounds depending on which model you buy, and they're usable, not fantastic, but if you're starting off, it's the best way to start off your event streaming sort of thing will be that. And then from like 30-40 pounds, the price jumps up exponentially to about 140, 150 to 250 pounds per headset, and you do need 2. Highly recommended is to please ignore all things like gaming headsets and stuff like that. Those are all will be completely useless in this situation. Rule out USB headsets unless you've got a very, very specific style of setup, which you're using a digital mixer and stuff like that. And if you want to use USB, that's, I wouldn't say it's fine, but you need a very different setup for that. And I've not had any experience in it. And from what I've spoken to with people about it, it's not really advised unless you're going for a very specific situation or it's an online event or something like that. So that's very different. Audio mixer, definitely need one. Without your audio mixer, your broadcasting headsets don't work. Simple as that. Cables, this sounds like a really silly thing to mention, but you'd be surprised how many times I've missed out on a specific setup I wanted to do because I'm one cable short. XLR and RCA to 1/4 inch jack cables are your best friends, and I'll probably come back to that because talking about cables is really, 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 really important. Player headsets, right? These are the headsets needed for your tournament players to hear the game audio. In very much smaller events, this is not completely necessary because usually it's usually more of a casual setting. But if you're doing anything of note, possibly like a monthly or a regional or something like that, these are really important because the players need to hear the game, or you might have a reflect situation, which sucks. So, and your extras, depending on if you've got extra money or if you want to go for a specific setup, is your HDMI audio strippers, your headset amplifier, audio splitters, house speakers, and PA equipment is something that you can get into. That's more of the higher end sort of thing, where possibly the event that you're going to or the venue that you're going to might not even have a PA equipment. So if you wanted to get some, they're not incredibly expensive, but it's a considerable expense compared to everything else. But that's only if you feel that it's necessary for what you want to do. So yeah, exactly. So right, we are going to tackle the first and the biggest hurdle for almost every streamer I know, getting into broadcasting and stuff like that. This is probably the toughest, the very first time that they had a stumbling block. And I must admit, in the 12 years that I've done events, this has not changed. So we are going to talk about headsets. So headsets are a very brutal thing. They either make your event sound amazing or they make your event sound awful. There is no real two ways about it. These are literally the necessary expense for you to even consider like doing a broadcast. And even if you've got a choice between having a capture card and a camera setup for your commentary, or you could buy yourself 2 sets of headsets for the commentary itself. Buying the headsets for your commentary was always important. Like, we started off on 2 £150 headsets for commentary, and it was probably the single most expensive thing on our setup for a very long time, until obviously we grew bigger where it wasn't so much of an issue. But yeah, it's definitely something else. And having compatible headsets with a broadcast scenario and with the right jacks and the right connectivity is also a bit of a ball ache. So it's so much there that makes it a lot more difficult than it needs to be, because there's nothing worse than buying a headset and you find out that it can't connect to whatever you're using it with. So hey Rex, what's going on? Hope you're good. So the main thing that we wanted, I wanted to say there's 2 levels of audio of headsets, but there really isn't. You have a low level headset, which is the Superlux HMC 660X. These are good, I have 2 sets of these, and I actually use them as my streamer's headset. So if you ever watched an NGI event that's not online, and you hear my voice, I'm usually using one of these. They are cheap, they are effective. They have an adapter on them so that they run by 3.5 millimeter for the headphones, and the microphone runs via three or four jack XLR. I can't remember which one. XLR input. However, the downside to these headsets is that they do require phantom power, and depending on what else you have plugged into your setup, using phantom power is not recommended. So please double check before you want to get these. They are very, very good for low cost solution though. So and they've done me well. I tend to use phantom power with them quite often. But I know that some microphones and stuff can't take phantom power in the mixer, so please keep that in mind. But yeah, very good entry level. They're about 35 pounds each, I think, from Trunman's, I think is the name of the store. They know that they have for our people in mainland Europe, because of Brexit is now a thing. They have a German store which ships all across mainland Europe, and they've also got a UK store as well, which is helpful. So if people are trying to get into it in the UK, then you can buy from the UK store. If you want to get it in from mainland Europe, then they've got a German store, so you could check them out there. Right, now we move to our mid-range and higher level headsets, and this is where things get very expensive very quickly. The most famous set of headsets here is the Audio-Technica S1s. These are the most commonly used headsets across most FGC events. They are also the cheapest in this range at £150. That's about $270-80, 170-80 euros, 230 Canadian dollars, I think, and around 20k yen as well for anyone who wants to buy them in Japan. Well, if you want to, actually, they're a Japanese manufacturer as well, so they're pretty actually well stocked in Japan. So these are, if you've ever listened to any of the NGI events for the commentators, this is usually a headset that we're using. These headsets are great. They've lasted. We've had a pair that's lasted for 9 years and still going. They fray just slightly, but they're very useful. They come with a XLR and 1/4 inch jack port. A 1/4 inch jack is for the headphones, and the XLR is used for the microphone. It is fully stereo as well, and it's a dual cup over the head headset as well. Very, very, very useful. Never had anything wrong with them from personal usage. Oh yeah, if you got the non-phantom power version, the D. Oh yes, cool. I'm gonna put that in the slide later. Thanks, Rex. The 660D is really quite good as well. I couldn't remember if they had the phantom power version or not, and I couldn't remember which the model number for it was, so I didn't put it down. But yeah, they're very, for the price. It's the best entry level headset you can buy, hands down. It's easy to use and all that sort of stuff. So definitely, what Rex is saying is very, very true. The AKG HSD 171. These are the only other ones I've had personal experience with, and the AKG ones are fantastic. However, they are hella expensive. I think they go around for around 230. I think 230, 240. There's a lot of models, but this AKG specific one is specifically the XLR one that you'd want to use. There's a ton of models around sort of the AKG brand, which are all similar, but they have different outputs and connectivity and stuff. And depending on the connectivity that you have, you'd want one that's obviously got XLR and the either 1/4 inch or 3.5 millimeter. It really doesn't matter which one in terms of what the headphone uses, because you can just use an audio adapter for 1/4 inch to 3.5 millimeter. If anyone's confused about the port sizes and stuff like that, I'll go over that a bit later. but it's the basic. It's another great mid to high range headset. Another one. This is one I've seen used at Willey's events, which is the Bera Dynamic DT290 Mark II, and those are around sitting in the same price as the Audio Technica ones. I think they're about £10 to £15 a bit more expensive, not too more, but very reliable set of headsets. Willey's been using them for years now. I think for about 4 or 5 years, between 3 and 5 years, as far as I'm aware. And Ketchup and Mustard, you probably see them at Ketchup and Mustard's events in Leicester, stuff like Hyper Combo and stuff like that. Those are the headsets that they use there. Very, 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 very good set. Probably on par with the Audio Technicas. The sound quality should be just as good. I would have to double watch some of Willie's events, but from what I can tell and from what I've had, they're comfortable as well, so they're pretty good. And then they have the more expensive Bayer Dynamic ones, which is the DT790 XLR. You just specifically want the XLR version of these headsets because there's ones that come with the mini XLR and one comes with the 6-input XLR, which is not what you particularly want. So these models are very reliable. They're a lot. This one and the Sennheiser, Sennheiser ones I'll come to last. They're probably more on the higher end of the spectrum, a lot more expensive, but they should be good from what I've checked out and what I've seen. Unfortunately, I can't buy loads of headsets to test them because they're actually quite expensive. So from what I've gathered on all the research I've put into it, this is probably one of the better higher ones I can recommend. The Sennheiser HMDC27 is the other common one. The ear crushers. These are the other ones that uses a considerably smaller cup compared to most other headsets. You probably on much bigger broadcasts, you'd probably see these headsets because they're a lot more subtle. They've got smaller bands across the head, so you can't see as much of the headset itself. The cups are a lot smaller, and the clamp is a bit tighter. The microphone is very good. It's Sennheiser quality, and Sennheiser are known for their audio stuff, obviously. But they are for long wearing events. They can be a bit more difficult to wear, but their audio quality is almost second to none. So it's one of those things where you're balancing audio quality to yeah, Tunnel Dragon's completely right. Yeah, with glasses, it makes them a lot more difficult because a lot of the other ones, probably except for the AKG headsets, the cup covers all of the ears. So your like the hand of the glasses are sort of like tucked in, where the Sennheisers sort of go just over your ears, so it really presses against the holders of the glass arms. It's one of those things where it's sort of like the quality is amazing, but do you want to put your commentators through it? A lot of bigger streams use these headsets because their ear quality is quite above a lot of the other ones on this bracket. But I say if you're willing to fork out the money and you're in a situation where you're rotating commentators quite often, then these are a very good buy. There's not really many negatives about it, I feel, except for how uncomfortable it can be. So that bit sucks. I'm not even gonna joke about that. Right. Alright, so we're going to move on to the other more difficult thing, which is audio mixers. Please excuse the text; it was a little bit rough. I'll make sure on the version that is released, it will be a lot better. The audio mixers is probably the second biggest pitfall, and for anyone that has got absolutely no experience into audio, this is the bit where it sucks hardest. Because the thing is that you've got so many ports, you've got so many dials, you've got so many buttons. I don't know what to do. If I press this thing, this doesn't work. Or if I move this, it doesn't work. If I move this, and my audio echoes, and like now I hear people from like 6 miles away. And I turn it the other way, now I can't hear anything, and I don't know what all these ports do and stuff. And it's just like, how do you deal with all of this stuff? Mixers are as simple. The interesting thing about mixers is that mixers are as simple or as complicated as you want them to be. That sounds really bizarre considering how audio mixers are, but you could probably get away with not having to mess around with many of the settings on your audio mixer. Like a lot of them doesn't really apply, and when you want to use your audio mixer at an event, you really want to fine balance how much processing that you do with it, because the thing is, especially if you're doing events, and I can say this for basically almost every single Revolution, every single East London Fighters event that I've done, is that I've spent so much time rotating commentators and stuff like that. You think, right, I finally got it perfect for this person, and then they commentate for an hour and a half, and they swap with someone else, and they put their headset on, and they start speaking, and all of a sudden their voice sounds completely out of whack and stuff, and you're like, right, I need to change all the settings around and stuff and whatnot, and that gets a bit difficult. On bigger broadcasts, that's a lot more important, because you want that audio quality crisp. Like, I don't think audio quality would be good at something like Evo, for example. That's not really how it works. But for if you're doing something like a regional or like a monthly sort of thing, having a sort of a good base settings for all of the audio would be great, because that means you don't have to worry about half of the stuff that's going on. So and then all you got at that point, you probably want to change stuff like the gain or the volume, or even sometimes the bass, from depending on the person's voice, because there's been times where like people's voices have been so bassy I've had to actually change it in the mixer. I will try not to call out anybody, but like yeah, there are some very bassy people on stream, myself included actually. So so what you want to look for is the amount of inputs and the amount and type of inputs that you're looking for. So I have a picture, so I'm going to put it right on top of the presentation because I'm just that sort of guy. Alright, so this is basically your normal standard mixer. Let's see if I can turn on my... Do I have my whiteboard installed? General widgets. Oh yes, I do have my whiteboard installed. Fantastic. Let's switch this to classic mode so I can use my whiteboard. So this is the first time I'll be using this actually. Whoops. Freehand. Clear whiteboards. Actually, it's being silly. There we go. We'll come back to it. Anyway, the mixer in general, you're looking at this mixer and you kind of think, oh man, everything here is like really weird and complicated. I'm not understanding what anything here does. Like, what's going on, right? So let's talk through how a mixer works. So on our top left hand side, we have those 6 black inputs on the top left hand side. Those are your XLR inputs. These are the best type of audio connectors you can use. So if you can broadcast if you can have a headset or something with these inputs, that is absolutely necessary, because without that, XLR cables travel further than most other cables in terms of like their length without distortion, and also the quality on them is so good. So your headsets should normally be XLR. Under those are your line in, so these are your 1/4 inch jack. So if you've heard me say it before, the 1/4 inch jack is like the big version of a 3.5mm jack. They are very, very useful. Probably the second most used cable type. If you're a musician and stuff like that, you immediately recognize these. One thing to consider though, even to recognize if a 1/4 inch jack is stereo, is that if you ever look on a 3.5mm jack, so if you've got a pair of headphones and stuff like that, if you look at it, you notice that there's two black bands on there. If there's two black bands on it, that means it's stereo. If it's a single band, that means it's mono. And if it's three black bands, it's two. That means it's stereo plus a microphone input. Which one you'd want for this, for the line in, is that you want a 2-band input, 1/4 inch jack, because you want your microphone to be stereo. You never want it to be mono. That's bad, because if it's mono, then it only plays through one ear, and that is not good. So moving slightly away from that, in the middle where you can see the 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, those are basically a 2-channel 1/4 inch jack inputs. So for anyone that wants to know how the ones working in NGI, for example, these 1/4 inch jacks and the 7, 8 and 9, 10 channel are important, because if you are having your game audio out from a HDMI extractor through RCA, which the other name for RCA is the red and white, which I'm sure everyone has seen a red and white input. Actually, the red and white ones are here. It's like right next to it on the top right hand side. So you don't normally do red and white from those two to double 1/4 inch, and you're wondering, why are the channels considered separate but there's two here? But even though it's 7 and 8, but it's got 2 ports, why is it considered one channel? Well, the reason why it's considered one channel and there's 2 inputs is because each of them is right and left. So one of it is right and one's left. So each of them builds separate channels. So whenever you do, for example, RCA, like red white to double 1/4 inch, it's basically red white left and right into left and right. Even the red and white parts of an RCA are considered the left input and the right input and stuff like that, or the right output and the left output. So these channels are considered 2 but the same channel. So on a lot of mixers, you always see this is the same. You see stuff like 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. On our NGI one, we have 14. We have 14. We have from 10 to 16, I think, and then the other ones are like special other inputs as well. Pretty cool. But yeah, it's very much getting around your mixer is definitely important. Oh, quick thing. A note to everybody that is setting up. When you see the 1/4 inch jack and you've got like the port just under it, not the 1/4 inch, the XLR jack, and there's a 1/4 inch jack right under it. Please, for the love of everything that is holy, do not plug the headphone jack of a headset into the input just under the XLR. It's not what it's there for. Please do not do it. It's really annoying and it shouldn't be happening. So yeah, I've seen that so many times at like various events where people are setting up and they're like, yeah, well, this should go here, and it's like, no, it doesn't. It's a headphone input. You don't plug a headphone input. You don't plug a headphone output into a microphone input. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's one of the biggest things people need to remember. I've seen that mistake happen so often. It's just grinds my gears. Right, moving on. The red and white here on the top right hand side is your basically it's sort of auxiliary. So if you have something like an MP3 player and stuff like that, so if you have like a 3.5mm jack, and the 3.5mm jack is the one that you see in like headphones and headphones. It's one that you see for MP3 players and mobile phones and stuff like that. It's basically the jack we all know and love. That's a 3.5mm. But if you wanted to plug something in like an MP3 player, you'd usually go into your RCA input, which is your red and white up here. Those are very useful. They usually have their own set of inputs and volume and stuff like that. They're super analog and old though, so most mixers don't actually have this input, so that's something to keep in mind. Whew. I've done a lot of talking. And next to that is you can see the opposite XLR inputs. these are your main mix out. Right. Depending on what you're doing, these either A, go directly into your stream. So this will either go into your PC via a sound card, via 3.5mm quarter-of-an-inch jack, or if your sound card takes XLR, it'll go in via that as well. This is basically your main output. However, some mixers have two sets of these, so you could send one out into one channel or into one situation, and you could send another one out to a second. On the large NGI mixer, we have two outputs. We have one sent to the stream PC via quarter-of-an-inch, two-channel quarter-of-an-inch to 3.5mm into the back of the PC. Well, that's how we used to do it anyway. And the other one is basically sends it to the house speakers so that the crowd can hear the game audio and that sort of stuff. This way you could also route the commentators audio through it as well. That's a possibility. But you might not want to, depending on how you want your setup to be. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of commentary going through the house speakers unless it's a really, really big event, but I don't particularly find it's necessary. But if something you want to do, then this is how you'd be able to do it. Some mixers have USB out. That's different, and what that allows is that it allows you to connect to the PC via digital interface and basically turns your mix into a giant external sound card. These are very useful functions if you want to save on some cabling and stuff like that, and it's very particularly useful in terms of if you have a program that works with said mixer, which allows you to change and switch up the plugs, switch up the volumes and stuff, and mute it and stuff, like mute individual channels separately in a way where you don't actually have to touch the mixer itself. Some mixers are capable of doing that. Be warned, those are the sort of mixers that sit in like the 400-500 pound category. I swear there's a mixer in Free Play City that's like worth like 10 grand or something like that because it's got that sort of function. Hey Usma, what's up? What's going on? I hope you're good. Man's currently barreling when we're talking about audio. Antique, yeah, this mixer's this mixer basically, this is my example mixer really. So this is not anything that I'm particularly using at the time, but this is just like an example I needed to explain all of the inputs and stuff and what everything does and all that sort of beautiful thing. So we've gone over the whole top part of the mixer, which is all of your main inputs and stuff like that, which is important and all that great stuff. When we go to the bottom, mixer without an aux. Oh yeah, true that. But the thing is that I have a couple audio mixers with augs and stuff like that, but they're getting a lot harder to get. So it's, but I've never had a problem with it because I tend to use quarter-of-an-inch jacks for everything anyway, so it's not really not much of a problem for me. I love quarter-of-inch jacks. They're huge and they literally go everywhere you need them to. So on the bottom here, we have basically all of your dials. We won't go too much into the ones in the middle because that varies from mixer to mixer, and if I was going to explain each individual dial and stuff like that and how it works, we will literally be here for the next 3 hours, and I don't want to keep you here for that long. I respect you guys' time a bit too much for that. So on the bottom, we will these are your volume for your channels. As you can see, each of them match the number at the top, which is important because these control your volumes. Depending on how good your mixer is, your channel will have a mute function as well. Mute functions are very useful because they allow you to immediately shut off all audio from that channel without changing the volume, which is important if you want to keep it basically the same like volume and stuff like that. So you don't have to keep going up and down dials and stuff like that when you just want to mute someone and stuff. Also very useful if someone gets out of hand on commentary, when you could just press the button and it just keeps them quiet. Good stuff. So yeah, and on a lot bigger, more expensive mixers, you have something called the solo function, and the solo function basically turns the audio off from all other channels except for the one that you've clicked solo on. So this is great if you're going to, for example, going for intermission and stuff, and you just wanted to have music playing and stuff like that. You'd hit the solo button and everything else goes off and stuff, so you don't have to be muting each individual thing one after the other and stuff like that. So that's also really important. Occasionally you would have one at the end for like a sub mix as well, but we're about to go over that in a second. So on the bottom, on the far right, you have your headphone jack. Depending on the layout of your mixer, if you've got a small one, you'd want the commentary audio, the ones to go to the commentators, to run through this one. So but on bigger mixes, you definitely don't want to do that, because you want to use the control room output instead, so that you can speak to your commentators without your audio coming through the actual stream itself. So those are the two things to keep in mind. So your headphone out would normally be the one that goes to your commentators. It either runs to an audio amplifier or anything like that. So very, very useful if you're not using an audio amplifier and you're just plugging in the headsets raw into this. You're going to need a stereo 1/4 inch jack splitter into 1/4 inch jack, so that you can accept two inputs, and it has to be stereo. If it's mono, you get one audio on each side on each headset, which you don't want, so please keep that in mind. And then the one on the special red dial on the far right is your main mix, and the main mix is important because this basically sets the volume for your presentation and stuff. The higher it is, the higher the collective audio is. This is basically like the master audio in your Windows, for example. If you're in your Windows, for example, it's basically the thing that's like the main audio for all of the other rest of the broadcast, or all of the other functions that's connected to the mixer. And just above that is your sort of decibel meter sort of thing. This is important. You don't want your audio to be hitting red ever, really, because at that point the audio will start to pop and it'll start to crackle, and you don't want that because that sounds awful. So having it in the greens and the first level yellows is safe. Sometimes you can have it a little bit higher, but give it enough leeway so if your commentator starts screaming and stuff like that, the audio just doesn't blow through the roof, because that is always awful for your listeners and for your commentators, if they can hear themselves as well. If you look at a lot of like hype moments at fighting game events, you'd notice that when people start screaming, the audio cuts out. Basically, mixers do that to basically protect themselves and stuff, because at that point the audio is so loud it actually becomes a bit dangerous, so it will automatically cut itself off after that until everyone starts to calm down a little. It depends on mixer to mixer if it has that function or not. Like one of the mixers I have doesn't have it at all, so if you scream into it, it just turns into like high pitched static at that point, because the audio level is just like, I don't know what to do with this. So yeah, that's something to keep into mind. Let's change this back into split mode so we can get rid of our diagram of our mixer. Yes, we would actually go for that. Don't worry, we will cover that actually. I have not forgotten. I did mention it on the list of extras, so we will cover that. So with all of that considered, so what do we do? So when we no, you're definitely correct. It's definitely important. The bigger your events, the more important that audio amp becomes, because there's nothing worse than having to fiddle with the volume of a broadcast because one of your commentators finds the level too high or too low and stuff like that. It's very irritating. So yeah, I definitely agree, it's a must. We'll get to it though, don't worry. The amount of if the inputs are compatible with the rest of your setup, so for example, you might not be able to use RCA, or you might not be able to use 1/4 inch, but if it's working with all of your consoles, if you are for some bizarre reason using HDMI audio into an audio mix. So does it accept it and stuff like that and stuff? Yes, adapters are so important. Like adapters are like the king of like audio setups. It single-handedly saved Reflect. There you go. A 50p adapter can do that for you. Um, Audio mixers also are audio channel manipulation, so you can change your bass, treble, the gain, all that sort of nice stuff. Sometimes the frequency, depending on if you've got high pitched audio playing in the background of your broadcast for whatever reason, that's really important. It also helps with the noise cancelling aspects of the headset as well, if it has them and stuff like that, to sort of adjust it to see what audio it can pick up or what audio it wants to pick up. Phantom power, if your headsets require it, or if some other bits of bit of your setup require it, or if some of your microphones that you're plugging in don't like phantom power, is also something to keep in mind too. And any notable features that are important, for example, like a USB interface, an audio manipulation, timing, the mute functionality, having multiple outputs via a main mix, a sub mix, and a control room, and all that sort of good stuff. A USB plug-in, so you can plug in various sort of devices and stuff that way. Please, for the love of God, also don't, on the USB input on a mixer, do not plug your phone in. I've had so many mixers crash because of it, and it just creates this very horrible high-pitched noise. Don't do it, I beg you. I've had people that have said, oh, can I charge my phone here? And I'm like, what? And then they plug it in there, and then all of a sudden the mixer crashes because it has that sort of interface, and it's like, I don't know what to do with this. And then the commentators are now deaf, I'm deaf, the people that listen to the broadcast are now deaf because the mixer has died. Don't do it, please. And if you see someone that tries to do it, please murder them. They don't deserve to live. So yeah, yeah, that's what I had to learn how to do. Is I had to cover it with tape. Why? I don't understand why people do that. If people see a USB port, they immediately think they could plug their phone into it. Oh God. I've had sound engineers do that before. That's horrifying. So yeah. Right. We've got a couple more ones to do. Right. So that is a mix. So we've done mixers. So we're going to talk about accessories. And the accessories are basically the small things you need. I didn't particularly have much time to do what NGI uses in his setup, but I will go over it. So I will go over it and we'll make a diagram later so people could watch, so people can have a look at it and see what they think. Yeah, basically. Yeah, old mixers are great because they don't have a USB input, but the minute it has a USB input, like, which is mostly for firmware functionality and certain things you could plug into it. So for example, a sound visualizer you could plug into an audio mixer's USB port, so it visualizes the audio. It's very, very cool, those things actually. Or it allows it to add an extra audio interface into it, depending on which one it is. Those are really what it's used for. It's used for other audio equipment. But then people are just like, but I could plug my phone into it though, and I'm just like, that's not how this works. So I don't know. Right, so audio accessories. So these are the little things that once you've bought your setup and you've made your broadcast and your audio broadcast and stuff, and you sort of been like, right, I've got my audio mixer, I've got my headsets, I've got the cables, the basic cables that I need to plug it into the PC or to plug it into a sound card, or it's USB mixer, so I could just plug it directly into the PC via USB input. All that beautiful things. Unfortunately, there's still other little bits and pieces that you do have to remember when you're using when you have an audio setup. So audio amplifier. So this is what was gone over. This is what our UF1902 user in the Twitch chat has basically talked about, is the audio amplifier. These are really, 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 really awesome devices. So basically, you've probably seen them at any fighting game event where you're doing commentary at. They've got a sizable stream setup. The other one, the ones that they're known for, is let me find it, is the Behringer HA400, which is basically this miniature amp, basically, where it takes one input and has 4 outputs. So temptation would be to plug your headphone out, your headphone jack into the headphone, your headphone jack of the headset into the headphone jack of the mixer. However, if you want to be a bit more fancy and have a bit more audio manipulation, so your commentators are not shouting down the headset at you to change the volume of the stream, you can run a single, a 1/4 of an inch stereo single jack to the amplifier, and then plug the headphone jack, plug the headphone jack of the headset into one of these. Really, really, really important. So it means that they can manipulate the audio for themselves, and they can control how loud or how low they want the volume to be, which is also really, 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 really important. So because everyone has got different tolerance levels with their ears, so it allows you to adapt and change it without having any input from yourself, which is actually quite nice as a streamer, because people are talking to you less, and the less people that are talking to you while you're streaming, the better. So that's always good. However, if you do need these, you need an XLR extender to plug your headset into the mixer, because a lot of the times with these headsets is that the range of the when you split an XLR and a 1/4 of an inch jack, they don't split long enough so that it could be in two very far separate places at once. So you want to get an XLR extender for the for the commentary itself. It makes it so much easier, very, very useful. To be fair, you should have cable extenders of almost everything, but that's just a personal opinion of mine. They're great, very useful. They make it so that your commentators have an easier time. It makes it yourself has an easier time. All around good stuff. HDMI audio extractor, very, very useful thing here. Basically, this turns your HDMI audio into a HDMI audio out and video and audio out with either RCA, or it might have optical functionality, possibly, depending on which ones you buy. These are great if you want to be able to, if you want to plug it directly into a mixer. So what I do is that from the RCA input from one of these beautiful things, I go from RCA, 2-channel RCA, which is red and white, 2-channel into 2-channel XLR, 2-channel 1/4 of an inch jacks into my dual channel. A lot of them have optical now still. Yeah, it's true, that's true. But it's still digital, so I prefer RCA. Yeah, even what I do is that I actually, having optical isn't as fantastic now, because the thing is that I never really use optical input audio anyway. But what I do use optical input for is for players audio, so the players can hear the game and stuff like that. But I'll get to that in a bit. So HDMI audio extractor, these are great. Specifically, what I'll say, if you're using a Nintendo Switch's HDMI audio is absolute garbage. Do not, under any circumstance, use it. It is awful. They are terrible. Yes, definitely. They're definitely great paired with the Astro amp, because the Astro amps I use those for East London Fighters events, actually, with the Astro A90 headsets, I think they are. But yeah, Switch audio is god awful garbage. It's the worst thing about the console. It's terrible. It's low volume. It's low coder. Everything about it is just bad. So basically, you want a HDMI extractor, audio extractor, to grab the HDMI audio from the Switch. It's from the Switch's HDMI signal, and you'd want to run it through a mixer just so you could turn the volume up. That alone will improve it considerably. Like, other than that, unless your capture card's got a very, very high boost for its HDMI audio, I wouldn't recommend running Switch audio through HDMI. It sucks, and Nintendo should be ashamed of themselves because of it. Ugh. Absolutely horrible. Anyway, 2-inch quarter jack to 2-channel 3.5mm jack. Very basic, versatile input. So this doubles up on multiple things. For example, if you've got the ability to do audio out and you want to plug it into a 3.5mm jack of your PC or laptop, easily does that. It will probably go into your microphone input or into your line in, depending on which one you're using or whichever one you're more comfortable with using. So there's that. Very useful for that. It's also very useful if you want to plug stuff like phone audio and stuff like that, or MP3 audio, which someone wants to play for as like overarching music during intermissions and stuff. We tend to sometimes use this at the opening of an event if our mix is controlling the PA system. So we're playing music at the start of the event and stuff, and we don't want it tied. We don't want it specifically tied to the stream and stuff, because the stream might not be able to output it, especially if it's connected via USB and all that sort of stuff. So very useful to have a couple of these around. They're good for multiple things, so I definitely recommend having one of these around. Optical splitter, these are great if you have got an optical out for a console. So this is more of your Xbox One X, PlayStation 4 Pro. The PlayStation 4 Slim does not have a optical out, but the original PlayStation 4 does. So there's that. I can't remember if the Xbox One S has one. I don't know anything about that console actually. But neither does the PS5 or the Xbox Series X. God, that name's bad. Has optical, so you'd probably want to do. You'd probably want to do to get HDMI audio extractor to optical and split optical, because optical is very, very good for carrying your audio output for your players. It's very good for that. Easily manipulated. If you've got your hands on a Turtle Beach DSS, they're great for that, but you can just get an optical to 3.5mm jack DAC instead, so those are also super useful. The optical splitter should always, most of the time, be USB powered. Always make sure it's powered, because you never want your audio to cut out mid anything, to be honest. Very, very important, because you don't want your players to start complaining, because that would be bad. Cable extenders speaks for itself. Don't need to put anything extra here. Simple as that. Always have 5 or 6 more cables of the same type of cable than you need that is necessary, because A, you never know when someone will nick one. B, you never know when customs will rip your cables apart, aka Spooky going to the Dominican Republic. C, you never know when you lose one in transport. And D, you never know when one of them dies, so you always have a spare one. So yeah, definitely always need to have spare cables and cable extenders at all times. Really important. Please do. They're normally investing £30 into just extra cables is such a good investment. RCA better than 2-channel 1/4 inch. RCA 2-channel 3.5mm is probably the lowest, but it's probably going to be your lowest priority. You'd only ever want to use that if you're doing very specific things. So yeah. Oh, not better into. Oh, I thought you were talking about quality. Okay. RCA is that how you do yours? RCA into 1/4 inch. RCA. Yeah. 20. Oh, okay, cool. That makes sense. So yeah. So usually, because 3.5mm is usually the end goal for like a PC and stuff like that. However, if you do want to do sound, if you want to use a sound card, you can use XLR out as well, and they're very useful adapters. Like if I was at Free Play City right now, I could show you like I've got a whole bag worth of just cables and adapters that just go from one input into another. And also you have to keep in mind female to male output as well changes how the cable works, so please keep that in mind. If you want your audio cable to run longer than 10 to 15 meters, you can get an audio amplifier as well. Those are useful because you never know when that's going to be necessary. If you notice that there's loads of events where they have like the stream booth right at the far back, but the presentation is happening at the front of the event or that sort of stuff. Yeah, you could always have more adapters. Always can have more adapters. Adapters are insanely important. Like it's you only miss an adapter when you don't have it. Like people see my bag of adapters and cables and stuff like that. Why do you need that for? And you're like, you always need it. You always need it, and then like you would only miss it when you don't have it. And there are times when I've had to change my whole audio setup because I'm missing one cable. Like, and ever since then I've always learned, bring as many as you can because you never know which one you need. Like, and there's some events even throw curveballs at you. Like, you're like, I didn't even know that this port even existed, and you're like, right, I've got an adapter for that, so it's fine. So yeah, adapters and signal cable changes are so important. And luckily, because the audio is analog, changing the import of the audio signal doesn't do as crazy things like when you're changing a digital signal, where, like, for example, when you change something from like DisplayPort to HDMI, weird things start happening sometimes. Where because analog in this situation specifically anyway is all analog, it doesn't really matter what you plug it into as long as the port physically connects, the audio is going to travel, so it doesn't matter. So that's the most important thing about analog audio, is that it's highly adaptable and it can be highly manipulated as well. And you don't have to worry about, does this signal gonna work in this thing? I'm not too sure about that, sort of thing. So yeah. However, something to keep in mind. This is mostly aimed at like people that are doing arcade machine recordings and stuff. Some audio signals, depending on the amplifier, have security on it. So if you're going to plug out something from an adapter's RCA input or some RCA output, it will sometimes crash the cab. So please keep that in mind. That is also a thing that can happen. So if it doesn't work or you just get static over the audio, that's probably why. So yeah, it's just to remember that. Also, optical is also a digital output of audio as well. Luckily, there's a lot of digital to analog optical thingamajigs, so there's like a lot there basically if you needed to do that. Rightio, I've done a lot of talking. So I think the only thing I haven't covered is cables, what we use at NGI. So let me put the camera on myself because I actually don't have a slide for it because I couldn't actually get all of the components done in time. Where's my stream chat go? Right. So in NGI we normally use we have the Behringer 24 input mixer is for our main presentation, for our main broadcasting setup. Very, very good mixer. It has USB out, so we have it plugged into the PC via USB, so it's like a giant digital sound card. Very useful, slightly less cables than necessary to plug it in. Loads of different inputs and stuff like that. So all of them just shoved into that single mixer. Then we have the USB out, which is our main output going into the PC via USB. Then we have our sub output, which goes to our speakers, which is useful. So it basically means that it carries specifically just the game audio, which is nice. It's all the good fancy stuff on that, which means that we can control the audio levels of the PA system and stuff. Very, very good, very, very useful for that. What else do we use? We do use one of the Behringer HA400s for our headphone amp for our commentators. Great stuff. We also use a HDMI to RCA audio extractor as well for our audio into the mixer. For our players, we use basically a set of gaming headsets. They're around 30 quid or something and they're there by default. People could plug in their own headphones if they want to, it's up to them. But from the console, we have optical out, and that optical out is split two ways, and one goes into each player's DSS, which is a Turtle Beach DSS. Unfortunately, they don't make them anymore, but it's basically a fancy way of saying a DAC. And the reason why DACs are important is so that they've got their own volume control, they've got their own bass control in it. and all that sort of stuff, and that allows them to control the audio themselves, so they don't have to worry about turning down the audio for the other player or turning down the audio for the stream or anything like that. It's their own individual audio setup, which they can use. They could change however much they feel like. If they don't want to use any of the headsets on stream setup, they could plug in their own headphones, and it doesn't have to interact with any of the audio that's going on with the stream. Very, very useful thing. And we have one on each side, so the our optical goes into that, and we have our BPS Audio Technica BPS ones headset is our commentary headsets, so nothing too fancy there. But yeah, that's most of our audio setup. It's not exactly flashy, it's not exactly special, but it does what it needs to do. And then the commentators get the audio control room out from the mixer, so that I can talk to my commentators and berate them whenever they swear on stream when I've told them not to. So, or if my commentators are just doing something really stupid, I just start telling them off. So, which happens a lot more than you think, actually. Rightio. I think that covers most of the main things. Does anybody have any questions? Because we went over a lot, and I'm surprised that we actually got done in just over an hour, actually. Is there any questions from the crowd? Jixie just laughing. It's always because I know that a lot of people have stumbling blocks over the audio, but I also know that there's like a couple audio people in like this chat as well, so there's they could always vouch for anything that will this will be cut and edited into YouTube? Yes, it is. This will join the first episode, which is also on YouTube as well. So now I will put it up on YouTube. I promise. I will manually put the. Do you use any compressor? No. The reason why I don't use any compressor is because it's not really necessary with FGC events, and there's not really that much audio implementation for it to be necessary. And the thing is that you'd want to have everything to have the highest quality anyway, because Twitch and YouTube tend to butcher your audio regardless. So what you'd want is basically to have it as high as possible. So the minute it gets into like your broadcasting presentation and stuff, it will automatically compress the audio and stuff as well. Yeah, this doesn't happen very often. Yeah, it's the only place you would need it, and some of them, and if you don't have it on it, it's not the end of the world. It's not particularly required. I've never had to really use mine on my mixer. Like sometimes I might have digital settings to change like something, but that's only on a studio recording rather than on a live broadcast. I've never actually had to use it. It's a pretty rare thing to use. I've never really. I don't know if UF's used one. If you have, man, please say. I very rarely do. I don't think I've actually used one for years in terms of a broadcast. So, hope that answers your question. Use for music, yeah. For music, it's definitely important. Music is a completely different beast, and you want to have those. You want to have that for music effects in general, especially for the sound engineering sort of stuff. That's actually really out of my ballpark. So yeah, no, it's for basic volume control. We do use it. So basically, that's sort of gain balance. That's sort of gain balance manipulation. Gain balance and bass manipulation basically is the basic form of that. But it's past that itself, it's never necessary, sort of thing. There's never such a wide variety of audio changes that you never actually need to use it as much. Like for example, when Grimulus is commentating, I might turn up the bass on his voice, for example, just a little bit, but that's just like far as it goes, sort of thing. or if there's a lot of people that are new that are quite low volume speakers, they will just like turn up the gain or something if turning up the volume doesn't really do anything, or it turns out too high to the point where it makes the rest of the broadcast sound really weird. So that's the thing about is that get that balance between the gain and the volume. You don't want too much gain. If you get too much gain, you get a lot of the background static and stuff like that. But you don't want the volume too high because it skews the balance of the actual audio itself and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of things to do with that. Is there any other questions? Oh, actually, say thanks for the question, Rex. That is I think it's a definitely good one. It's just good to start screaming. It's good to have a good impression on that channel. Yeah, it is. Thing is that because I focus mostly on anime games, I don't usually have that worry. So, so I don't normally have to worry about that so much. It's never particularly an issue. Oh man, it's the thing is all the hype things that you see in like anime fighting games, like people just come to expect it, to be honest with you. So people don't necessarily get hype. I think Chaz is like one of the few people that gets incredibly hype over commentary, but that's just he's just naturally like that. So it's a pretty much an issue for Tekken, because like in Tekken, since the community haven't particularly realized that the rage mechanic is actually they've not actually realized it's a comeback mechanic yet. Like you see a lot of like rage comebacks, like people get really hyped for it, and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, fair enough, I guess. So that's just my jab at Tekken. So, but yeah, definitely I've definitely had to use it for Tekken. Like it's something else for Tekken. I haven't actually streamed as much Street Fighter, so I haven't had to use it. I've not had to. That's not really something that's come into my. It's just come into my experience as far as I'm aware. No, USB out on the mixer. Do you using USB mixer? What do you do if you want something in the mix that you don't want in the main mix? Don't want in right. That if I do that, if you want something in the mix that you don't want in the main mix, what I normally do that is that I usually allocate that to my sub mix. So usually the main mix is usually my my main mix is my everything that I specifically want to run through the stream under any circumstance. So my game audio commentators, and that's usually it, nothing else. Possibly house mic, depending on the situation. So USB out is main mix then, yeah. It's only main mix. Yeah, it's only one. For the Behringer set, it is only one. Some mixes, the USB output has a different channel compared to the main mix, depending on which ones they are. So, but the PC works both ways, because you could actually send the signal back into the mixer that comes back out as well. It's weird because you could be used as you could like use it as a sort of output as well. It's really strange. I've not actually got the hang of actually messing around with that function. When is the home stream with 5 mics to pick up your voice in surround sound? Not anytime soon, because having those sort of microphones costs way too much money. I have messed around with surround sound microphones before, and that sort of setup in the audio booth of New River Studios. It's very fun to use, but I wouldn't use it in any other situation other than that. I wouldn't do it. I can't. I'm more likely to accidentally hit the phantom power in the mixer and end up blowing up all the mics anyway. That's more likely to happen with me. But yeah, to go back to the question about the UFVs. I have actually. I've done it before. I use my smaller mixer. I do. It's very, very useful as a secondary channel. because all of the dials are all separate, you sort of have to set that up completely separately. It's a bit bizarre. But I do use it. I sometimes use it as a extra secondary commentator out setup. So what I sometimes do is I sometimes run the FX through that and send it to the commentators if I feel like having a bit of a laugh, because the FX one you could also like manipulate the audio, make it more echoey and stuff, so you could like play pranks on the commentators and stuff. It's kind of fun actually. Accidentally once though, during Revel, during one of the finals, one of the people that was streaming for us accidentally hit the FX swap button on the mixer, which swapped the FX and control room FX and main mixer signals, completely swapped them over, so they acted like the other one instead, and that caused absolute mayhem for hours, and I couldn't understand what they did until I eventually got home and messed around with the mixins to see what happened, and I was like, oh, so that's what they did. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it's a lot of those things on the mixer, people need to be prepared to know what they do. So, and it's one of those things where it's such a niche situation and incident, I wouldn't expect them to know what to do. Like it's one of those one in a hundredth, one of the out of 100 things that is on the least of my priority list that would actually happen at an event, and it happens, and you're like, well, and you can't really fix it live as well, because that means changing a lot of stuff here and there. It was strange. It was super strange, but yeah. It's not the fact. The thing is that it's not someone that like wasn't allowed on the stream setup. It was just basically one of the people running the stream accidentally pressed it. It's like, it's one of those things where you don't think anything of it, and like they might accidentally press it, pressing something else and stuff, and it goes off, and you're like, and they're like, why is the audio so weird? And I'm just like, I don't know. And then you look at it and you kind of think, oh, so that's the problem. Okay, fair enough. How the hell did you press that? It's just, at that point you can't even argue. You're like, oh, okay, I guess that's just an accident. That's just how accidents are sometimes. So yeah, it's just one of those things in broadcasting, I guess. So at that point you can say is, what can you do? So it is what it is. Audio is complicated for the most obtuse of reasons. So like I can't even be mad. Like I can't even be mad. See, the thing is that when you have when you have a team, right? And this is the most important thing. Like one of the reasons why I'm not a particular fan of streaming on my own, other than the fact that it can be quite boring, and possibly like some events it could be really lonely. Like you don't really get much interaction, and you don't really get involved in things. But when you have a team of people, you sort of get the flow of people coming through, and you could sort of interact and stuff like that. Occasionally these sort of things happen, but like it's never to a point where I think to myself, man, I wish I didn't have a team. This would never be a problem, because I've just never come across in my head. So it's one of those things where like, and the thing is, it's one of those cases where not even if you're broadcasting all the time with a set of people, not everyone always has the same retention of what everything can do, which is just natural. And plus, like, out of all of the 4 or 5 streamers that we have, I'm the only one that literally sits with the equipment 24 hours anyway. So I record that until it comes for an event. Oh, do you know what? I've thought about doing that once and just running a separate audio mixer through that, or just connecting an audio mixer into like a walkie-talkies and stuff, like, and just I've always wanted to do that and mess around with it, because audio commentary is so crazy. Nah, UF's got his own stuff to run, man. Let him do his thing, please. Like we have enough stuff going on, and he has enough responsibilities going on, and we probably couldn't afford him as well. So the answer is going to be no. So he's amazing at what he does, but we absolutely cannot afford him. So the answer is no. So yeah, it's with like, I've always wanted to do that, because our banter on the stream team is somewhere in between. It is somewhere between casual, mental, and absolutely vindictive. It gets a bit crazy sometimes. And to be honest with you, I'm the person that usually speaks the least, actually. So there you go. I usually see all the nonsense. We usually actually interact. We mostly interact on Discord during an event via text. But I've been considering doing some sort of audio setup at some point, just for the banter. To be honest with you, I think the only issue is that doing that sort of setup is that it makes it a little bit more harder to concentrate on the stream sometimes. But at the end of the day, I think it's doable. It would be funny just for the lols, and it's one of those things where if nothing offensive is said, and I can't guarantee that's always the case, if something isn't offensive is said, then you could at least like have that as bloopers and stuff on a separate video. Like, but there are times like when something goes wrong with like the stream, like people start cussing, sort of thing. Like I've done it a couple times, but like it's never like cussing the team, and it's never cussing the team. It's usually someone else has done something stupid, and you're like, right, this guy's actually a waste man. So yeah, it's usually that sort of situation, and it's usually one of the attendees doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. Oh, definitely. Yeah, editing will be required. Yeah, it's true. You would need proper focus. Yep, nah, I could. Yeah, that is true. You would need to focus. The X32. I'll have a look at that actually. The X32. I haven't seen that one. I'll actually have a look at it straight off. Actually, do you know I've got Firefox open? I could just check now. To be honest, I've not actually seen this thing before. I probably have, but I don't recognize the model number. I don't remember anything these. Oh, it's this thing. Man, I haven't actually seen this thing in a while. That is a very very nice very nice mixer. That is one of the high end ones. 730 quid. Not bad actually. It's not a lot cheaper than I thought it would be. Hmm. That is a very nice mixer. Yeah, I can see how you can do dual comms communication in that. I definitely think that would be very useful actually. Actually, I don't need to close the window. It's got 16 sub mixes now. Blatant. There's one that's at Free Play City, and there's one there that's got like 32 on it. It's like a 10. It's the Behringer, and it's like costs like £8,000, and there's like one of these in Free Play City. Absolutely beast of a mixer sort of thing. And it's got so many sub channels and stuff. Like we've been thinking of setting it up in there, like having having like surround sound. You've got that kind of money, FGC. Well, you will soon see once things open up. But well, I won't spoil it too much. But yeah, so with that mixer, what we were thinking of doing in Free Play City itself is having it so that all of the speakers, like there's like 8 large speakers around the building, all right, and then the game audio comes through all of them. But if you're sitting at the back, the commentary's audio comes from behind you. So you could hear the commentary audio behind you rather than it coming from in front of you and stuff like that, and manipulating it that way and all that sort of stuff. And then you could have like Dolby 7.1 surround sound going with it as well. It sounds actually kind of hype when we messed around with the allocation of the speakers. We just did it. We put it in a giant circle, and basically we got some people to sit in the middle, and we were just messing around with it. It was quite fun actually. It's more set up to obviously do stuff like bands and stuff, but you could do some pretty interesting stuff with it, FGC wise. So, but yeah, that thing is kind of hilarious as well. It's definitely a very good mixer. I wish I had more time to mess around with it, but it's I envy anyone that actually has to carry that thing around, because that thing is super heavy. Yeah, digital mixers are ideal. So they're very, very, very good. It's just that the bump from analog mixers to digital mixers is quite huge, money wise. And since this is more geared towards the more starter and more beginner stuff like that, I didn't really cover it. But the digital ones, once you're on unequaled media or visual platform or Tenno as a whole organization, or it sounds really weird for me to say this, like ESL and other places like that. Digital mixes are definitely the way to go. But at that point, this is one of those things where I was saying that where with events, the cost of audio rises in correlation with how big your events are and how big your responsibilities are, and that's the reason why it's so important to have that's why it's so important to have the audio keep track with the how big your presentation is. So it's one of those things where it's the more money you put in, the more quality and the more adaptability you get, sort of thing. It's audio is a very much its own special beast in terms of events. And the thing is that like mixers are great because you could use them for literally almost every other event as well. So there you go. It's they're definitely one of those things that you could, if you want to move from broadcasting from FGC events, because you really don't want to be just doing FGC events, something that you really don't want to do just on its own, because it's not going to get, to be honest with you, it won't get you anywhere. To be honest with you, you should have to be able to be flexible in doing whatever you need it to do. As long as you know where to spend the money, people waste their money on buying things like stuff when they have like a £50 mixer. Yeah, exactly. It's like you spend so much money on headsets, but their mixer's just okay. And yeah, it's the best thing to do with audio is to balance it, so you have a mix of budget for your mixer and a balance of budget for your mixer and for your headsets. One shouldn't be much bigger than the other. Like, one, you can't have one here, one here and one like here. It doesn't work. You need to have a good balance of it, and then you sort of make it matches it on its own price point, which makes it really good. So yeah, the thing is that just like also FGC events are not really, there's no point of shelling out unless you're really necessary for an event and stuff like that. Unless you're hired to do an ESO and like spend like 40 grand on an event or something like that, which is always a possibility. But yeah, it is one of those things. So does anyone have any other questions? We're almost coming up to the hour and 40 minutes mark, actually. So we are getting. Do you use 2-track, as in the red and white 2-track, the RCA 2-track? I mean, very rarely. I very rarely. I only do that if someone has been nice enough to plug something into that, but it doesn't happen too often. I could probably say of all of the events of 2019, I used it like once, and I can't even remember what I used it for. I've never used it. I used to use it back before, in like 2000, between 2011 and 2014. I used it a lot, but I've not used it lately at all, because that's back then when the PlayStation 3's output used to go through red and white, and you could just plug it directly into the mixer that way. So like, and sometimes mixers don't have red and white inputs, so you just use the 2-track instead and just lower the volume. So you're like, oh, there you go, the job done. But I've used it very rarely. Like ever since I've started investing into RCA to quarter of an inch stereo 2-channel stereo cables, and I've barely used it. It's one of those ones with sort of like archaic. It's like an ancient thing from like the old times, in it. Considering that RCA has probably been around longer than I've been alive, I think. So there you go. For 2-track, damn. I never thought I'd actually get a 2-track question today. Right, any more questions? I do think the 2-track one is actually my favorite of the day. That's a 3. I understand. It's just one of those questions where you're like, how much does this guy actually know and experience? Let's throw the 2-track in. I understand. it just reminds me of like Frost's question last week of saying, so how would you deal with dealing with 12 PCs and like recording all of them? I'm like, okay, let's throw that all into the ATEM box or NDI it just for the lols. Say NDI is probably the most expensive option. Yeah. Oh, actually, that reminds me. Speaking of audio, this is actually a small thing to throw in. Small thing to throw in, and it actually ties into last week's episode. Actually, the I don't know if anyone remembered, but when I mentioned the Magewell HDMI quad last week, I said that it separates the audio and video channels of the HDMI signal. What's really useful about that capture card is that you can add the HDMI audio signals separately into like XSplit and OBS as its own separate source, which is actually really a lot more useful than you actually think. It's been times where I've needed it for something and I'm like, right, should I put it in? And then like it's possible. So I guess there's a bit of correlation between the two episodes. So yeah, so it's one of the good things about the Magewell is the fact is that you can split the HDMI visual to audio aspect of it, which is good. But yeah, I think we're all out of questions. Unfortunately, I don't really have much in terms of FGC stories with it for this one actually. Not ones that are any particularly relevant. Well, actually, I did when like someone accidentally flipped the FX and main signal over. I guess there's that one for this week. So there you go. Right. So now that that is all done and dusted, next week we'll be going over cameras. So we'll be going over some cameras. This one's going to be of a bit of a more broader topic because there's a lot of cameras, and we're just going to talk about some of the ideas. We're going to talk more about the ideas. Glass and photons. Yeah, basically. We're going to talk about the stuff that makes a good camera and we'll do individual mentions on cameras as well. But it'll be more talking about the ideas of what makes a good camera, what doesn't make a good camera, what inputs that you need to be aware of, and all sort of other bits and pieces. We will go over lenses, and all the stuff that goes around it and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a bit more like audio and less like capture cards. So I can say that much for the audio. So I can say that much for cameras. And then from the next episode after that, I'm not particularly too sure what we will cover after that, but I'm sure by the middle of like this next week I'll probably figure out what we're gonna go over. If anyone has any other ideas and stuff, and there's stuff that you want to throw in, then exposure triangle. No, we're not doing that. We are absolutely not doing that. We ain't got time for that. We ain't got time for that, and I don't have the qualifications for it. Absolutely no way. Absolutely no way. We are not dealing with that. Try to keep it beginner friendly here, and try not to make myself look stupid. So, lighting. We will cover lighting. We will have a section of lighting in cameras, and we'll cover lighting in its own separate topic as well. But lighting is specifically necessary for cameras, so we'll definitely cover some lighting aspects next week. And then for like the extra bits of the broadcast, we'll have a section in lighting as well, which we could probably do that as the fourth lesson for it. But yeah, we'll cover some lighting. We'll cover some lighting next week. So, and then we'll cover some lighting next week. Then we'll do presentation styles, episode 4, and I think we'll probably do overlays, episode 5. Actually, I've got actually set up in my head, and then broadcast accessories, probably episode 6, and we'll probably have either episode 6 or episode 7 is the last one. So do you know what? I've not used it, so I can't recommend it. Like, I can't recommend something that I don't use. Like, I'm not gonna talk much about how I feel about Elgato products because I don't have a good opinion on them. Like, and I don't think anybody should be using Elgato key lights for an event. That's such a home stream thing to do, to be honest with you. I'm not for a home stream. I get, yeah, you could do that if you just want the effort. Not even that. No, I don't have the best opinions of the capture cards either. I've had a HD60 Pro brick on me before. The Stream Deck is the only good thing from Elgato I can recommend as well. Yeah. That is the sad truth. It's the only thing that's worth recommending is the Stream Deck, because it's the only thing that's that I feel that's worked out well. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of their capture cards. The drivers are weird. Their cam link is weirdly unviable on a lot of things. Yeah, their capture cards break too often. They're weird. The cam link is, the idea of the cam link is good. The problem is that it's not compatible with everything, which is really weird for a USB 3 capture card device. I'm just like, what? Elgato is just hella strange, man. And the only reason why Elgato is really popular is because they really feed off the whole we are gamers. We're for the gamers, all the gamers accept us and stuff like that. Do you know, it reminds me of very Cyberpunk 2077 styled marketing sort of thing, where it's very influencer based and stuff. Ava Media is trying to be more like that as well. But like, yeah, it's the thing is you could get lucky with it, but when you're coming at it from an event standpoint, like, I feel that the less you have to worry about equipment breaking on you, the better, basically. So if I've had bad experience with a couple capture cards, I'll probably never touch them again unless I absolutely have to, and I've got no other, unless I have no other option. But yeah, for home stream, I would recommend Ava Media. Well, I'd recommend the Ava Media Live Gamer 4K. That's definitely, I'm using that at the moment. Been absolutely flawless, and also it's got double the bandwidth. It's double the bandwidth than the Elgato 4K Pro. What do I use in events for Revo and stuff, Rex? Well, not for Revo last time, but if there was Revo in 2020, I use the Blackmagic HDMI Quad 4K, and I use the Major HDMI Quad 4K. And I have a separate Major HDMI Quad in my Thunderbolt enclosure for my laptop. For my home stream, unfortunately, I only have a micro ATX PC, which sucks. So I have limited PCI slots. But at home, I use a Live Gamer 4K in my ×8 slot, and I have a Live Gamer HD2 as my secondary setup. So I have two capture cards in my home PC. That I usually use for testing and that sort of stuff. So I use my home setup just to test various things. So that's what I normally use. So, but yeah, it's for event stuff. It's usually completely different to what Elgato and Ava Media usually advertise. But for home streaming, I definitely recommend. I could recommend the Ava Media internal stuff. I wouldn't recommend the Ava Media external stuff, because their external stuff tends to overheat quite often, which is really bad. So not that good. But Elgato, I don't really have many nice things to say other than that the Stream Deck is an amazing piece of tech. Other than that, it's just whatever. I'm not. But in terms of Elgato, like, I've had like people tell me that I should use more Elgato stuff, and I'm just like, it doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't suit FCR I need it to do, and like, it's, yeah, whenever I check, because even though I follow them on Twitter, whenever I check them, it's sort of like, yeah, man, the Elgato family and stuff like that, and it's like, ugh, no thanks, it's not my sort of thing. I've not tried the green screen actually. Maybe I have to give that a go actually. Give that in combination with the XSplit VCam and stuff. Oh, actually, one of the episodes we'll talk over broadcast programs as well. That's just another important thing. It'll be very. You got a Live Gamer HD2. Live Gamer HD2s are reliable, and one of the nicest things I like about the Live Gamer HD2s is that you could plug two of them in the same PC, and then and if you plug two of them into the same PC, the drivers don't suddenly explode. It's just it's great. I love it, and it acts like a universal webcam across Windows. Fantastic bit of kit. The SD card slot. That's the external. I like the SD card slot as well. That's the SD card slot is on the external one. Live Gamer HD2. Live Gamer HD2 is the internal one, and the Live Gamer Portable 2 is the one with the SD slot. So the Portable 2 is the one that does 4K footage, I think. And they've also got the Bolt, which is Thunderbolt 3, but I would never ever recommend the Thunderbolt 3 exclusive capture card. That is such a waste of resources. Yeah, the marketing same guy that does it. Yeah, Razer does does a similar thing that way and stuff. It's just sort of like, ugh, no, I'm not feeling it. Very sort of gamer bro orientated sort of stuff, and it's sort of like it's one of those things where it's like quite a few of us like events guys, if you ever talk about like saying that, yeah man, we'll pass on Elgato stuff because they're kind of like naff, then everyone's like, but they're good, you see what these big streamers are sponsored by it, and like Method was sponsored by Elgato, lol Method, and it's and you're like, yeah, so it doesn't work in an event space. It's just like whatever, man, they're too busy breaking, that's their problem. All right, yeah, that's a large flurry of capture card talk. But if you're interested in more in capture cards, I will refer everyone to my previous episode of this series, where we go much more in depth of capture cards and which ones are good, which ones are naff, and which ones are events only. And do not buy it unless you like are heavy committing. Too busy breaking. Yeah, they are literally too busy breaking. But if you've got an Elgato device that's still working, hold that thing close to you, because obviously it's obviously you are blessed. You're as blessed as Lewis Hamilton's Twitter timeline, and it's worked out for you. So so next week we'll be going over cameras, camcorders, some lenses. I mean, that's what fueled my purchase. I'm glad it's helped. It's a very, very nice card. The drivers can be a bit weird sometimes, but once you get it up and running, it's very, very good. Also, the analog, don't send a customer get, no, it should be working. Well, I say that now, then like 2 weeks later, you come back to me and say, yeah, it's actually stopped working now. Thanks, Rail. I'm like, oh, whoops. All capture card drivers could be weird. Yeah, exactly. Like all of them could be weird. It's just the AverMedia ones. They took a bit because I bought them quite earlier on, and the drivers were really strange. They were like they didn't know what to do with themselves mostly. Saying that, like Grimless had one like his HDMI, his live game HD2 like brick on him. So like this could happen to anybody. So it's just one of those things. All of them could be weird. Yeah, like don't even get me started with the major generation 1 versions and all that sort of stuff. Ugh. It's just drivers are just drivers something else, and Windows does not help. So all right, now let us fly off into the ether now and set you guys free, because all of you amazing people watching it deserve to be free of me and this nonsense. So until next week, we will be. I'll see you then, unless I'm streaming in the middle of the week. Then you'll pop in and say hi. Ask me any questions. If you want to follow me on Twitter, this @RailCarner, same as my Twitch page. Where I occasionally post things to do with various nonsense and sometimes a hot take or two. If you have any, check out NGI events and stuff, because they are that's where my home is. So if you want to know anything more about events and stuff, but yeah, feel free to contact me about anything. It's just I'm also on Discord under the same name, so you could just if you send me a message on Discord, I will reply. Until then, make sure everyone stay safe. If you can, stay at home. If you're a key worker, please stay safe. If you work in the NHS or the health system of your country, I appreciate you, and no amount of thanks will ever mean as much, could ever mean enough, because for putting your lives on the line. Wear a mask and stay and listen to scientists. There you go. Oh, it's not hard, is it? Anyway, guys, until then, catch you later.